Welcome to Writing and Influence, the podcast where words meet impact. I'm your host, Elaine Acker, and I believe that publishing, whether it's a book, a blog, or even a simple social post, has the power to amplify your influence and change lives. Your words have power. Let's start writing with purpose. Hey friends, I am excited to introduce you to Sarah Sears. Sarah is the founder and creative force behind S Design, and if you're from Oklahoma, chances are you've seen her work with maybe not even realizing it. She's helped shape the look and feel of everything from the Oklahoma City Boathouse Foundation to Myriad Gardens, and yes, even the state's own branding. Sarah's not just a brilliant designer, she's also a strategist and a mentor and a real community builder. She started the Oklahoma chapter of AIGA, and she's picked up a whole bunch of awards along the way. She's the kind of person who knows how to bring big ideas to life through design and storytelling. Now, I got to know Sarah through the B2B Sales Magic networking community, and I wanted to bring her in today because I've learned that she is especially good at helping businesses in transition. And it's not just design for the sake of beautiful design. I mean, it's helping businesses manage changes in their growth. So, for example, you'll notice that I just renamed and relaunched this podcast. I learned a few things that led to this switch. So, it can be as simple as rebranding one aspect of your business up to maybe that full merger or acquisition situation. And outside of work, Sarah's all about good food, fine wine, outdoor adventures, and time with her family. And I seriously can't wait for you to hear her take on branding, creativity, and building something that really lasts. So, Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Now, you just told me what is not exactly a secret, but not many people know about it yet. So, you have to tell
That's true.
everybody here. You had a little something to say about the Olympics.
Yeah. So I think it's exciting for everyone in Oklahoma City right now because they announced last week officially, even though unofficially it's been announced for a while, that we're going to have a portion of the LA Olympics in Oklahoma City at the River Sport venue, which is a previous client of mine. And so that's really exciting. I think it's a great example of an organization that set out years ago when there was nothing on the river and they had a vision of what that could be. And it included having an Olympic training facility and being positioned for the Olympics. And then here we are this year. So getting to do, right? We're going to have the canoe slalom event in Oklahoma City for the LA Olympics. So that'll be fun. And girls softball in Oklahoma City. But
That
I think
is
it's a twofold, right? Because you've
Yeah.
got the River Sport brand, but also that changes perception of Oklahoma City's brand.
Definitely. And you had a hand in that Olympic branding, right?
Yeah. So at the time, not the Olympic branding, but the
Okay.
River Sport branding
Yeah.
for sure. And it was interesting because you can't use a brand with the Olympic logo. You have to have special permission to use it. And so when we did the announcement, when they became an Olympic training facility, maybe 2012 ish, we did a big announcement and we couldn't use the new River Sport logo. So we really depended on the typography and colors and all of that because the only logo you could use was the Olympic logo.
So
Just some
many
branding,
rules.
interesting things. Yeah. But when you have that consistency, then when people get it and, go through those experiences, you've got that continuity of brand perception. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I love that. So let's talk about businesses that come to you. When businesses are in some kind of transition, now it could be a rebrand or a growth phase or something even bigger like a merger. What is the first thing that you look for when you start to work with them, talk to them?
Well, the first thing we do is we just sit down and have a chat. Like what's going on? Every company is a little different. So, really diving into what the situation is. Sometimes through that discovery process, you really learn a lot more about what the problem really is that needs to be solved. It's often not exactly what you think it's going to be when you get started. And often through that discovery process, we're able to better define what opportunities there are, what barriers there might be, and how the organization wants to approach that. And that's typically done with leadership discussions, research, qualitative data, interviews, surveys with within the organization to get really clear around who they are. And then after that, sometimes the latter part of that is a brand audit where you're really looking to see, okay, here's what we think, but then based on everything we've discovered, that's not really actually what people think. And a lot of times people think of brand as a logo or your messaging, but really it's the perception that's in the person's mind about who you are.
Yeah.
And so you can only control what you can control. And so some of that is, how are we going to have experiences and touch points along the way from now and moving forward that are going to help people to understand better who we are, or have a closer perception of who we are to who we think we are, or who we actually are,
So maybe tell me what that looks like in real time, if you can. Is there a story about a recent project or something where, yeah, you set out thinking it was one thing and then you dug in and you found out more and the business evolved or the project evolved and it was kind of something else? Can you think of a time when that you can share? I know a lot of things are confidential, but
Um, I think sometimes with organizations, they just don't really realize until you really start documenting all the touch points, what people are actually experiencing, or asking, doing the interviews and asking questions about what people actually experience. We recently worked with a large university law school, and they were very separate identity in a way from the university
Mm,
that they're part of, because the university has a very specific brand in its larger sense. They really go after a certain type of people in entertainment and some other areas that you wouldn't necessarily align with the law school. And so I think, in a project like that, as you go through the process, it just becomes clear what the right thing is to do. And in that sense, what we realized was, it really wasn't, yes, it was definitely independent in some ways, but in other ways, you were still interacting with that university. And that could be very confusing if you were in a school where everyone thought, oh, we're just over here by ourselves doing this one thing. And you didn't realize that really the pathways and the journey that that student or that donor or whatever was taking was crossing them into all these other areas with the bigger, larger university. And there was a lot of inconsistency. We didn't really need to change their brand. We needed to identify what their differentiator was in the market, and then also align them with the standards as much as possible with the university, so that those transitions felt intentional. If that makes sense.
it does make sense. And I want to highlight one thing that I think came out in what you just said, and that is when you were looking at the university project, you were looking at this one piece of the university and how it aligned with the university as a whole. So then you're looking at that visual piece, but you are also looking at, when I hear you talk, I know that you're digging into much more than just that visual piece of the branding. So talk about that a little bit, because I think that's something that's different about how you approach your projects.
My background is in corporate identity and visual communication. So that is where I came from. And people often think about brand in that way. But really, because brand is your perception, right? You have all of these different experiences, and you have pathways in working with different organizations that you're going to go through. And a lot of times people don't actually get through that pathway themselves. So they don't realize, depending on who they are. And then if you think about the way that we communicate and share information, one of the reasons I think that I love looking at the whole organization from a business strategy standpoint. If we are working, let's say, with a university, and we have that school's strategic plan, then while we're going through and aligning purpose, vision, values, we're also aligning that to the university, right? So you're still, even though we're saying yes, it's to, we still got that hierarchy. So, it's not a total creative project in the sense of I'm just going to do something completely different in a way. You have to figure out, where are the differences that we're not bringing forward, because everything you're going to do in that brand is going to drive that business strategy. It's not just about the visuals. I mean, there's a visual cohesiveness, but there's also language cohesiveness. As a writer, you know that. Do I sound, correct? Like there are certain values that you want people to live out in their expression of their job, right? So then now you've got operations and HR. Like, how do we do our jobs in a way that's natural in the way that we communicate, that we represent the brand that we're working for,
Yeah.
And I think this is where also in a merger and acquisition, you might realize some people are not the right fit, and that's okay. As long as you have a good plan for helping them to find the right place. I think, approaching it from a human sense, because what you really do want is people that fit within that organization. They're going to show up, that have those same shared values and things. So a lot of what we do is help people to get clear on what those are so that they can apply them throughout the entire organization. And then really you just have a more efficient organization with more opportunity to build value for employees and clients.
And I think about what you're saying on the, this grand university level. And so, some smaller business owners, kind of like me, might be thinking, so what does this look like when you pare it down? Excuse me. So when you pare it down, and I think about even just the rebrand of this podcast.
Mhm.
So when I was at Grow 2025, I spoke to Brian Steele, and he is a podcast producer. And
Right.
he said, I've been digging into your podcast a little bit. I have a few notes for you. Do you want to know about this? I'm like, of
Wow.
course I do. Do tell.
Yes.
So he and I talked for a while, and one of the things I realized was that our old title was Cover to Cover Influence, which I loved because I came up with it. It was something that
Yeah.
I created, and I loved the alignment with books, read it cover to cover kind of thing. But the more he and I talked and the more opportunities I saw with doing the podcast, the more I realized I had to change the name. And that
Yeah.
felt like a real bummer. But I think it's kind of a little tiny insight into what goes on in a lot of businesses, because we have our umbrella brand, but then there are little things like podcasts and blogs and emails and things that we are branding and
Mhm.
naming. And I think it's really easy to, like building onto a house, it's really easy to kind of lose track of some of that.
And have you ever walked through a house that hasn't been intentionally planned out? It's really uncomfortable.
Yes. And there's that emotional attachment to the thing you
Yeah.
started with too, or to
Sure.
this latest thing that you did. So what
But the emotional attachment, yeah. Oh, I didn't mean to
no,
interrupt you.
it's all right. What do you wish more leaders understood about kind of that emotional side of branding?
Yeah, there's quite a few things there. Number one is the naming. Naming is so difficult, and especially, obviously now, like there's so many names taken, and then you get these ridiculous names, like some of the drag names that are on television. But the reason why is because it's just really hard to find a name that has not already been taken, and so the trademark portion of that is a significant consideration. A lot of the work that we do comes from people that are like, oh no, now I have a cease and desist, and they just didn't take the time to go through and get things properly vetted before they launched it. And so I think that's especially, and you just never know when your business is going to grow, right? I mean, a lot of times this is someone coming in from out of state saying, oh, now we're coming into your state, but we have the national trademark on this. And I'm sorry that you're this little bitty business, which happens for a little bitty business. Redoing your signage and your naming and updating on your social media is a really big deal to have to go through that all again. So And the other thing I would say, when you were saying how attached you are, because so many people, it's so dear to people's hearts. But I think one of the things that we have to remember is that we're often not designing. I mean, we're not designing for ourselves, right? We're
Right.
designing for our client. And so people get very attached to the colors they like, the look and feel of things that they like without considering, okay, so if my client is this specific type of person, what is their life like? What brands do they follow? And based on that, they're going to make a decision. Something happened to me this morning and it made me think about it's a super simple thing, but it was kind of funny because I was standing there. I had a doctor's appointment and I was going to get a cup of coffee, and they have a cabinet where you can just pull out the cups. And
Yeah.
I stood there for a long time, right? Trying to find the mug that felt like it was my mug, right? Like
Yeah.
some of the mugs I didn't like. And I was like, oh, I don't want that one, just based on shape and color. And it's so interesting to me how we gravitate to the things that we want. Well, your customer is doing that too.
Yeah.
And you wanted to find, if you want your brand to match for the right customer, you really need to understand your customer. And that can be really difficult, especially for small business owners, but also for mid-market companies or founder-led companies that have maybe been around for a really long time. That could be a huge challenge if you're trying to update something to make it modernized and to sell, to let go of things. It's a delicate balance, right? How much are you knowing for that? And is that brand equity something you wouldn't want to mess with? Or, how much is it not a good fit for the new audience? Maybe if you're changing your strategy and going after a different market.
This is a random little rabbit trail, but you just made me think. So often, people ask, what is the science of the color? What color should I choose?
Mm,
What should I
yeah,
do the thing? And for me, when I chose my colors, it was about, even though it should be perhaps about the customer a little bit more, it was about the fact that I had to look at them all day, every day. And I wanted
sure.
something that I liked enough to look at. So anyway, any passing thoughts on people when they're choosing logo colors? Is there any advice that you give them on colors and that?
Well, I would say that one question that we have that we ask people when we're doing identity development is that, sir, are there colors that you do not like? Like, let's just get those off the board right now, because no one's going to approve something that is already a problem. And of course, in Oklahoma, red and orange, the Sooners and the Cowboys. I mean, so you just, sometimes we present things in black and white if we know we're going to have to do a color, because we don't want to get, we don't want the concept thrown out before we
Right,
can get past the color. So, but color does have meaning, and especially in certain industries, and that meaning comes from culture, right? So as a designer, you have to be careful too, like where is this going to be used? Because if it's something that's international, there's a lot of research that would have to be done, or testing that would need to be done in other countries, because they're going to have different cultural aspects that are going to change the way that I perceive that, especially when combined with some other visual, or maybe, especially in identity development, animals, things, different metaphors, things like that, that can be problematic if it's not vetted thoroughly. But these are things a lot of times that nobody really realizes that they know. We're not aware of all the subconscious stuff that goes on in our
yeah.
minds. But we have it's almost like epigenetics. We have so many trees of information that's informed how we respond to color, even through plants, like this is edible, this is not. And so, in modern time, red can be warning, right?
Right,
So, and then, blue is water, soothing. So you can see how these things can be applied to different brands based on those things. And I would say sometimes we kind of go the opposite direction too for differentiation. So we have a client, and I think they were called Greenwise Realty, which I thought was just terrible. And the owner is a good friend of mine now, and she says that I told her that in the first meeting, which I don't remember, but she was pretty fond of that name, and she had come up with it. But she was really passionate about, doing environmentally sound real estate, and really, letting people know what they're going to buy and what the energy costs were and all these different things. And I just thought that is a super narrow market for Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And so we created a name for her that was Verbode, which meant green home and also means forbidden in German. But I disclosed that to her and she
Yeah.
was okay with that. But I also said, the green thing is a trend. So it's gonna go up and down. I mean, like we still have those things, but then you're just gonna be in a sea of green, if it gets more popular. So we picked coral for their brand color, which actually stands out really beautifully on a lawn. So sometimes color, the opposite, you're picking it for a specific reason, but it's the opposite of what you, and very distinctive in the real estate market because where everything is kind of blue and red and those kind of things.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of thought that goes into color, but you
Well,
want it to last.
yeah. And then I think about the practical aspects of color. And because I spend so much time on the words lately, just in the last 2 weeks, I've been working on 2 wireframes for people for their websites and really working on the words. And a lot of times I present those with the black and white blocks just so they
Mhm.
understand the sections and kind of the story-based approach to why I've laid it out the way I did. But when I see them taking that and applying it, they then have someone building the page. I will see their colors and things that they think they like, but they haven't really tested it for the reader. So now it's back to the client and the reader and the customer and how are they perceiving these things? And I find myself going back to say, no, black on maroon doesn't really serve you
Mm.
very well because I can't read that. You may think this looks beautiful, but I can't actually read it. So then there's those practical aspects. I'm
Mhm.
assuming,
Accessibility is a huge
yes,
thing with color.
that you are
So when you're
walking.
creating a brand, you have to think through all those things before they even happen. Often we'll have colors within a brand that also have rules around them, because accessibility would limit things so much. So you might have to say, here are your secondary colors probably,
Mm,
but you can't use them on top of each other. Like this can only be used in reverse and this can only be used in this with a percentage. I mean, it can get pretty detailed, especially if you have a larger brand. And that's why it really never ends, because there's always, even if you design a brand, I mean, like it doesn't take long at all to realize, oh, now how would I do that in this situation?
yeah.
'Cause you're always kind of working on those nuances.
And I think accessibility has become such an important piece of design now, right?
It always has for designers,
Yeah.
but because you're designing, it's human centered. Design inherently is human centered and it's about communication and form. So I think depending on a person's background, maybe, but in school, we were taught to work in black and white first, and we were taught about comprehension and, you know, different things are more readable, typefaces are more readable, more legible.
Yeah.
The spacing might change how you remember something or don't absorb it. So there's that gets into a lot of geeky design stuff when you get into that stuff. But yeah,
Well,
accessibility is always fine.
yeah, and so let's walk through some specific examples because we talk about, I talked about my tiny little podcast shift and we've talked about a little bit about big things like mergers and acquisitions. But from your experience, when should people be thinking about refreshing or rebranding? Sometimes they do it too soon and sometimes they don't do it soon
Mhm.
enough. Because you
Yeah.
look at
Mhm.
something like Coke and you don't wanna change Coke because that's such an iconic brand, but yet, you see businesses every day that really could use a little modernization. So
Sure.
what
I
are your
also think
thoughts?
that there's a lot of redoing of brands that I think, sometimes shouldn't, that maybe there wasn't enough thought put into what is the existing brand equity here.
Mm.
I think a lot of times people kind of engage with it before they think, oh, now I have to change this on 400 trucks. And that can be a
Yeah.
big deal. But okay, let's back up just a little bit. Can you restate that for me? Like the question.
I So my question is, I'm thinking about times when people should quote unquote,
Okay.
should
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
consider a rebrand?
Right. So I do think you're right. There's kind of a catch 22. Sometimes people come to us and they just have a business that they're starting. They're going to put the seed in the ground and it's going to start growing. And people have an idea of what they want. They have a vision for that company. But as you know, those first probably 3 years or so, you're really figuring out who you are. Like you probably don't really know who your clients are and you're learning. You're really doing a lot of research. So I think even though if something's well funded, it's always fun to do a brand, right? I would do that almost as a prototype, like you're learning, right?
Mhm.
Because design is that way. It should always be, it's iterative now, right? It's not like it used to be where you just design something or have a project and that was it. It's very iterative. So I think you're always learning. I don't know if there's a perfect time. It would be different for every business, but there becomes a time when you just start to realize, I don't think this is going to get me to the next place,
Mhm.
right? Either your sale, something's sluggish or you're not getting business the way you used to. Through direct partnerships, you've grown or scaled to a certain aspect. It's time to redo your website. So now you're thinking, oh, wait, maybe I should really stop and think about this and put a little bit more into the strategy of how we're going to build this brand. I wish I could give a more specific answer, but I do think it's okay to start with something a little more simple. We've done this before where we have an organization. It's like, I just need something simple to get started.
Mhm.
And we know that, and we can put that together for them and they can come back later. But still having the strategy work done, doing the initial, who are we? What
Yeah.
do we stand for? Like, what is our purpose? What are our values? So that at least you've got some aesthetics that represent that, and it's not a disconnect.
And that made me think, so I've come to think of you most often for branding around, businesses in transition, some sort of transition. But when you just said strategy, it made me think maybe it also lines up with times when you are refreshing your strategy or something
Oh, yeah.
significant has changed about your
Mhm.
strategy. It seems like
Yeah.
that's a moment.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Because often, especially if you're repositioning a little bit, you might find yourself with an opportunity to compete in a space where there's maybe not as much competition, but you would still want to look and see, what does that competition look like? Like you don't want to pick the same colors. You don't want to be
Right.
confused with somebody else. And so if you haven't done that research and really to figure out, what do you have to be in like the top three to really break into a new area? You don't want to you want some blue ocean, right? You don't want to be going in and just being part of a feeding frenzy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I mean, you need to distinguish yourself. And so sometimes, doing that strategy up front can help you really nuance that or decide, oh, we thought that, but now we've done the research. That's probably not the right way to go. Everything you change about your touch points and the way that you communicate and your messaging and the way you roll that out to people is going to follow your strategy.
Yeah. Is there anything I've not asked you so far that you think we should know?
I think it's important for people to have someone in their organization that we kind of joke and call it the brand police, but to have someone in their organization that really understands brand because things can really go off the rails pretty quickly. I think about it like if you were going to hire someone to landscape your yard and then you went away for the summer and thought it was going to be the same when you came back. It's not going to be. So I think there's a certain amount of internal, intentional understanding of brand from a organizational alignment aspect and an implementation aspect that everyone really understands the role that they play in that.
Mhm.
And that can make or break a brand. We once did some work in transportation. We got to work on the brand for the transit system in Oklahoma City,
Mm.
which was really exciting. And, of course, one of the core pieces of that are the bus drivers. And they had to understand that they were the face of the organization. And before that, they didn't really know that. So I just think that everything they did was going to reinforce that brand. It really didn't matter what the new name was or if it looked good or anything like that. If somebody got on that bus and there wasn't a smile and there wasn't a sense of community and there wasn't that emotion and connection, then it didn't matter what you did. So that's what I would just say, is that it's something that I think organizations are going to do much better. And it's going to be really valuable for them and exponential if they can educate or get people excited internally to see when, hey, are we going, is that really what we're about here?
Yeah.
And kind of rein it in, know when to rein it in.
Well,
Yeah.
I think that goes back to the point of this podcast. It's called Words and Influence. And here we are
Mm,
talking about design, but it really matters the context in which the words appear.
yeah. The messaging is
Yeah.
really important.
Yeah. So I feel like what you do, naturally ties into especially the extended piece of what you do. So just like you were talking about
Mhm.
the work with the bus drivers and having them understand that what they're doing is contributing to this overall brand, you're setting the
Yeah.
stage for them to have their maximum influence. And
Right.
I love that.
Yeah. And I mean, we do a lot of co-creative work with people. And so we did a big messaging project last year, and the organization was all over the United States. But we went through the discovery together. And so we got all the words that they use. And in this particular industry is very science-based, but their clients were more people in the community. So
Yeah.
again, helping them to get the language, like, when you say this, is this what you mean? And when we finally got it, there were tears because people thought, oh my gosh, that is so much more moving
Yeah.
when you explain it that way. That's what I'm passionate about. But their language they use every day did not connect with it in that way. So they needed to help translate that into messaging that they could come back to, that really resonated with everyone in the organization. But again, they gave us those clues. They just weren't thinking about communicating when they were using those words.
Yeah.
We were able to work it back into their messaging in a really authentic way. So I think it's all in the organization. I don't think branding happens to an organization. It's the translation of the brand out of the organization in a way that connects with their audience. So
Yeah. So I have to ask before we wrap up, something that I would think to be able to sustain the energy that you have for what you do. What are you doing outside of work? We hit on some of your hobbies and things, but what really regenerates that creativity in you?
Oh, I don't know. I've been thinking about this week because I've been kind of all over the place this year. I love meeting new people. I met you through the Good Humans Growth Network and my friend Catherine Brown. And so that's been really fun for me to meet people in different areas of work, because I think that is a really interesting group of people from all different backgrounds. And it's not the kind of people that you would normally bump into at your local networking event. So that's been really fun. People dealing with complex things. I'm on the board at the University of Kansas Architecture and Design School, and they have a really unique program there where they have industrial design, architecture, and visual communication, illustration, animation, all in the same school, because design, as you probably understand, the way I think about it is holistic and connected to everything. So whether it's the spaces or the form that it takes, it's all the same underlying practice. And so that's really exciting. I just got back from there, and they're building a new building, and they have a design build program where their students build a building every year as part of a home or a building with a different purpose. They've done 20 for the last 20 years. So that's really fun to just see all the work that those students are doing. It's the only program like that in the world. But I get excited about that next generation. And I kind of always had it. I taught for 10 years, and I used to have a really robust internship program, which I'm just in a different place now where it doesn't really work for the kind of work that we're doing now. But I think so that keeps me connected to what's happening with them, and then helping them and working with the other people on that advisory board to think about how do we bring also what's happening so fast outside of education
Yeah.
into them. So it's an interesting, so that is, I'm really passionate about that. And I love to travel, and I have a little cabin up in the mountains that I love nature, and I love to go up there. So kind of getting excited about summer. And that's probably why I get so excited about the work that I do, because I get to go see all these different businesses and how they impact the world and help them to do that and the best that I can. So there's always an underlying human aspect to that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I love that part.
Well, I know people are
So
going to want to know where to find you. So, where should they look if they want to follow what you're up to?
I would say you can find my website at sdesigninc.com, but I'm most likely going to be found on LinkedIn. And so I would just reach out to me on LinkedIn.
We'll
It's
make sure
the place to find me.
we'll make sure we put that in the show notes.
Thank
So,
you so much,
yeah,
Elaine.
Sarah, thank you for being here with me today. And I love hearing about how you're approaching branding. And it's not just as, a way to address the design challenge, but really a way to support businesses as they make transformations. And I just think you've got such a grounded, creative way of helping people navigate that change. I hope people are walking away from this with a lot of insights and inspiration. And if any of you are in the middle of growth or a pivot or just feeling a little bit stuck, I know Sarah is somebody you will want in your corner. So thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Elaine. It was great to talk to you today.
And thanks to all of you for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe, share it with a friend, and leave us a review. It helps more folks discover this show. See you soon.